And you're welcome. Let's start the show proper. Let's examine the upcoming nationwide protest in Nigeria, with the federal government seeking dialogue to address the concerns of citizens. This project, or rather protest, has sparked intense discussion across the country, and we have several guests to provide their perspectives on the matter.
Yes, that's right. Now, the planned nationwide protest aims to address various grievances ranging from economic hardship to demands for good governance. In response, the federal government has called for dialogue, hoping to prevent the protest from escalating. So let's start by examining the protest and whether or not dialogue is the answer. And to do that, we're joined by a panel of gentlemen and guests today. In the studio is Hassan Taiwo Soweto. He's a spokesperson for Youth's Right Campaign. We also have, joining us via video chat, Hamzat Lawal. He's the founder, Follow the Money, an action advocacy-based initiative that tracks and advocates for proper utilization of funds in government. We also have Ahmed Musa, director of the Muslim community for the APC Campaign Council, and he'll be joining us shortly via video chat. Gentlemen, very good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us today on the program.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody out there. Now, who are we starting with, Judith?
Of course, Soweto. Soweto, let me start with you by saying that the youth are at the forefront of this, right? We are a very youthful population. Yeah. So what are the primary demands from the youth, and how do you see the government's call for dialogue addressing these issues? Do you think that their call for dialogue to address this demand is the way forward?
Well, let me start by itemizing what I think are the key issues that has provoked this protest. The first thing is that you have a condition of hunger and hardship across the country, something which was provoked by the policies of this government, the neoliberal and anti-poor capitalist policies of removing fuel subsidy, of increasing fuel price, electricity price, and of course, of subjecting, the income of all Nigerians to a serious devaluation. All of this has created hardship. We have had, in the last 12 months, over 20 Nigerians who have died at different centers where grains or other reliefs were being distributed. The most atrocious was about 2 or 3 months ago at the National State University in Kefi, where about 2 female students were trampled to death. These are the issues. So that the demands, first and foremost, is that all of those policies since May 29, 2023 must be reversed. Fuel price must go back to pre-May 29 level. Electricity tariff must go back to pre-May 29, 2023 level. And of course, there must be an action on food prices, on the inflation. And we also want proper funding of education. Government, instead of providing more funds to education, has decided to give out loans that is going to subject Nigerian youth to a lifelong indebtedness. Instead of loans, students need grants, to support them through school and to ensure that they're able to come out in flying colors. We also need jobs, decent, well-paying jobs. What we have now, on the basis of the dialogue and agreement with labor, it's indecent pay. 30,000 naira to an average worker in this country does not do anything. And that's why you have to. They just go, and I'm telling you, just around 6:30 a.m., go to any of the major streets in Lagos. You are going to see civil servants trekking to work and trekking back later in the evening. That is how terrible it has become. And that is why it is important that there is decent job creation. And alongside all of this, we need an economy that works for the people. Today now, the Nigerian economy only works for a few. And that's why you have a situation where you have this wealth inequality, this wealth gap. You just have 1% of the population who are swimming in an ocean of wealth, while the vast majority are wallowing in poverty. And that is why it's also important, to look at the structure of that economy. And I think personally that the capitalist economic system is the major problem. We need to end the capitalist system and enthrone a socialist society. So these are some of the issues, that has provoked this protest and for which we want to march out. Now, when you talk about dialogue, we have to be clear. The government is not interested in dialogue. What we have today, right, is more or less a replication of what happened in the first few weeks of the protest in Kenya, where Ruto was given the impression that he wants to dialogue, while at the same time intimidating protesters and killing protesters. Because how can you say you want to dialogue and every day You are doing everything to castigate, to disparage protesters. You are saying, you are putting words in our mouth. The IG of police actually need to be reprimanded because it needs to tell Nigerians where at any of the fora of this protest organizing, it's been said that we want to destroy properties or we want to cause violence. Go to Twitter space that has been organized over the past few weeks. There is no mention of violence. What would-be protesters are saying is that they want to march peacefully and they want to put forward demands. But the IGP goes to the press, the DSS DG goes to the press and says that they are aware that some foreign agents want to. These are not indications of a government that wants to dialogue with dignity.
Soweto, you raised a couple of points. I'm going to come back to you on those ones. You talked about the different fora and different bodies that are advocating for a protest. You also talked about the government's body language, things that haven't been said, and much more. I will come back to you on that one. But first, Mr. Ahmed Musa, if you're there, I'd like to ask you this very important question. The government now has called for dialogue, just as Soweto has noted. Now, in response to the planned protest, this is what they want. But how do you respond to the government's call for dialogue instead of protest? Let's take examples like Soweto has noted what happened in Kenya, how it started. Have that in view when you're giving us your answer. Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, my sister and brother on the show. Well, it's important that people, Nigerians, who are asking for a peaceful protest be allowed to exercise their civic responsibility and their civic right as a country, as members of Nigerians. But we should also put on note that we know in recent time Nigerians will take laws into their hands by using protest as against of destroying properties of Nigerians who labored so much to put these things in place. Like we have seen various protests where ShopRites will be vandalized, filling stations will be burnt down, people, amenities, social amenities, even government things will be brutalized. So if this protest is a peaceful one, I support it, because even the president at the time led a protest where President Jonathan was in office. But you see that people take all this kind of protest, they leverage on it and they now use it, to destroy. Maybe you have a beef for somebody, or you have a beef for a particular person, maybe Dangote vehicle, this, that, Bua cement, this, that, and all of this, to mention about a few. You go there and destroy the property. That is when government, I am in support for a peaceful dialogue with the protesters. I know very well that things are difficult. Everybody is seeing it. But then we should, ensure this dialogue and then, have a peaceful conversation with government. And I think the president has started very well by calling, leaders of the country, traditional rulers, and appealing to them, even though he led protests during the Jonathan's administration.
Mr.
Which
Musa,
that one was a peaceful one. So I want to
now, a follow-up question to that, and I don't want you to go too far before asking this. If you, I'm still asking. I'm asking about the body language of the government, however, regarding this dialogue that they're calling for. On one side, they call for dialogue. On the other side, it seems like they're preparing for all-out war. They've deployed police, thousands of them in Abuja, and they're doing so across the country. What message does that send to the youth who are preparing for this protest? That's my question.
For me, I think the declaration of military personnel or police or whatever is to also maintain peace within the protester. Any government that will deploy, his security arms, to fight the people is not a government that will come to stay. The president has said it. Well, if you don't want me, peacefully vote me out in 2027. Though we have not got to 2027, nobody knows who will get there. But I believe that the police or the civil, the security agencies that are out for this are to protect human lives and property.
Hamzat, let me come to you for my next question, Hamzat. And Hamzat, it's very important that I ask this question because you represent CSO. You've been on the ground with many NGOs and CSOs. So I must talk about, the government and its approach with dialogue, and more specifically, the steps that they are taking. What steps do you think the government should take to ensure that this dialogue that they are having is not only just constructive, but addresses the key concerns of the protests? Because it doesn't look like they're talking to the protesters or even addressing the nation. It seems they're just talking to government officials, security chiefs and ministers and traditional rulers, but not to Nigerians.
Well, thank you for having me, and good morning, Nigerians. I think first, now is not the time to be politically correct, and now is not the time to play on the sentiments of Nigerians. We know that Nigerians are very peaceful people. We know that they're resilient, and we also know that when you have a protest and it escalates and gets out of hand, it is government infiltration and sponsoring of talks or hoodlums to cause mayhem, not the peaceful protesters. And we can argue and go back and forth on this and even use the ends as example. But also we need to also understand that the protest has already started. The protest is ongoing. The only thing that is remaining, and that's why government is trying to calm the nerves, is they don't want people to converge and hit the streets to demonstrate, either by protesting or by carrying out a rally. But the protest has started. If you follow the conversation online and offline, people are already protesting. People are already airing their grievances. So what the government is calling for is calm and for dialogue. I think the government needs to undertake this dialogue in an unorthodox manner. You cannot sit with people that you usually sit with and talk and say that you're having dialogue. How are you sitting with young people? We're not saying that, Nigerian government, the thing that they always do is, there is structures, there's process. If you want to follow this existing structure, it is not the existing structure that is calling for protest. It is every young person who this economy has affected deeply that is calling for protest. And when you say, you don't know the names and the faces and who are organizing this protest, I don't think that is the best way to go about it. I think first the Nigerian government needs to show empathy and also lead by example. You cannot say that everybody should tie their belt and you're not tightening your belt. You can have government officials flaunting wealth on the public space while every other person is hungry, angry, and cannot afford basic necessity. I think first the Nigerian government needs to speak with wisdom, using empathy, but then most importantly, they need to reach out. So, and when I say the Nigerian government, I'm not only talking about the executive, also the legislative arms. Why are we not having town hall meetings or constituent meetings led by the members of the National Assembly? Why are we not having all of these meetings and all of this conversation? But even if the Nigerian government says they want dialogue, so what are you bringing on the table as the government? Because there are clear demands that are being made by young people. So if you say you want to dialogue, are you also cutting down the cost of government? Where you're going to, because we all know that the government bought SUVs. We all know that some of these government officials ride in SUVs, some even bulletproof. So are you reducing the cost of prevalent spending? What else are you doing as a government? Because the poor people are saying, low-income house owners, like we call them, are saying, first, removal of subsidy is killing us. Increase of electricity tariff is killing us. Public transportation, healthcare, education. So what are you doing as a government to even pushing this effect? I think they must lead by example, because we've also seen some level of corruption, even in this administration. So again, you must lead by example, but you must also give specifics on what you're going to do. So you also give timelines, because if protesters or intending protesters are saying, okay, we want to give you time, we want to share our swords, they must be able to hold you to account and say, okay, you've asked for 6 months or 18 months or 24 months. These are the yardsticks to hold you to account. And then everybody would go back and then continue to hold government to account and watch how government would meet these needs. Why this is really being escalated, because there's no trust. But when government speak, people don't trust them again because, you know, we're more like a generation of broken promises. A lot have been promised to us, but nothing have been given to us. So you see that grievances are built, not just now, but over time.
Well, thank you very much. I want to come back into the studio here with Soweto, and I think this is where it gets critical. Let's take a look at the communication that has been going around. First off, there's so many different fora, like you mentioned from before, who are agitating for this protest. Most of them are the youth. However, do they have leaders? One, maybe a couple of them, but the mass protest itself does not seem to have one specific leader. Apart from that, do they have an agenda? Do they have an itemized agenda, what they're asking the government for? This is what we want, this is what we want, by this time, that time. Is there a timeline? Who does the government want to dialogue with in all this multitude of fora that we have all agitating for a protest? Let's take note. The Kenyan instance with Ruto, who has conceded so much for the youth, but yet, while still calling for a dialogue, everything seems to be going down the drain, with protests still continuing and no specific person to actually address and speak to when it comes to what can I do for you as the youth. We see that upcoming in the Nigerian instance. So, what gives? What are your takes on these issues regarding the identity of the people who are actually at the spearheading the protests?
The identity of those organizing the protest is not unknown. It's actually ridiculous when the government says they are faceless. I have a face. The people who have been organizing Twitter spaces for the past few weeks, they have faces. But the government likes to run with this narrative. One, because it is not their usual people who are leading the protest, and they'll be more comfortable with those they know. This is an organic movement that has erupted from below. Many who are active in mobilizing for this protest are first-time protesters who are just activated by the hardship, but most particularly also by the inability of existing structures of struggle to represent them and to stand for their issues. And what do I mean? For the past 12 months, the leadership of the trade union movement, the NSC and TUC, have generally ignored the economic situation, the issue of fuel price and all of that. Instead, they concentrated on a narrow struggle for minimum wage. So that for the vast majority of young people, artisans, and other members of the oppressed people, they feel that nobody is speaking for them. So that what is happening now is the people, the unheard voices, now coming out of the woodworks to say we have to speak for ourselves. And that is exactly why the protest is important. Because if the government wants to have a dialogue, you need to allow the protest to take place. For those who are active in this protest, who are promoting this protest to come out, to express themselves, and to put forward their demands, it is at that point that the question of representation and dialogue can therefore be possible. Because there are many groups that are involved. Nobody can speak for the entire movement.
But it's a large group. It's a very big group.
Yes.
I'm going to go somewhere with this.
Yeah.
It's a very big group that means a tangible amount, a percentage of Nigerians. Where were they when it was election time, when it was the run-up to elections? Where were they as a representation? Who was representing them inside of the elections? Who was the one person that said, I am for the youth. If I get these votes, I can speak for the youth.
Was there an election in this country? By virtue of what we know by democracy, because as Africans, we must try and live up to the highest standard of humanity. So that I'm not even saying that what happens in the US and co is a standard. But as Africans, democracy has always been part and parcel of us historically. That election and the elections that have been holding in this country for the past 20 years, can they be regarded as elections? And that is why the last election had a record abstention rate. Because many people did not feel represented, one, by the major candidates and their programs. Interestingly, all the major presidential candidates in the last election promised to remove fuel subsidy. So what that means is that even if the person here today as president was not the person that won, we will still have had this struggle because we will still have had this agony. And that is why, for me, the solution to this problem is a systemic change. And that is what this movement is all about. So when it comes to the question of dialogue, and I need to make this point very clear, if the person who says he wants to dialogue with people does not even recognize the democratic right of those people to express their displeasure, to have a peaceful protest without any intimidation, then what kind of dialogue do we want to have? Because the first principle of dialogue is that people will sit at the table with the confidence that they can put forward their issues and they will be heard. But they have not put forward their issue, but the president says, I've heard you. That somebody is not ready to listen to you.
Let's switch gears now to Musa. Musa, you are part of the ruling party, and we have you here because we understand that you're part of the ruling party. Now, with your earlier submission, you made comments. You said that it was important to maintain public order. That was what you said. You also made comments about, that a dialogue, that in spite of dialogue, you are here for the protest and you want a peaceful process, but also dialogue is important so that we can maintain public order. And so, to the part of you saying that you support a peaceful protest, the protesters have maintained that they want a peaceful protest. And so I have to ask you, how does the APC, and in this case the presidency, plan to ensure that any protest must be protected to remain peaceful? So that, what are the steps that they're taking so that it is not hijacked or prevent any potential violence from it being hijacked, as we saw during the #EndSARS protest? Remember, you said that protest is the right of every citizen. Musa, Mr. Musa, your television is on. Is there a chance you can help us to mute it so you can answer our question, please?
Perhaps maybe we move on to
Hamza.
Hamza while you're
Gears
doing
now
that.
to Hamza, because Mr. Musa, we're struggling to hear you there. Your audio seems to be struggling there. Hamza, let me come to you. From your perspective, Mr. Musa, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. We're struggling. Musa, let me come to you. Hamzat, I beg your pardon. Let me come to you. From your perspective, if you want to address the last question, please go ahead to do so. But I would also like to ask about the key issues regarding the utilization of government funds. This seems to be an issue with Nigerians at large, which have fueled the call for this protest. How can dialogue ensure or help in ensuring transparency and accountability, whether it comes to following the money, I'm using that pun intended, as well as making sure that the needs and demands are met by the government?
So it's the first is for government officials to stop living in bubble, because most time when they get into office, they're disconnected from the reality. So what is informing your budget? There is no needs assessment. There is no nomination from various constituents in this budget. So when you, in some cases, when you even look at government proposed expenditure, they want to build more schools where you already have schools. They want to provide more teachers where you already have teachers, and a lot of them now want to build bridges because, that's where you have big fat elephant project. But first is to talk to citizens and collect feedback from them, where you undertake needs assessment, and afterwards you undertake impact assessment. But I think first government needs to also do what I call proactive disclosure. So you don't even have to wait for citizens to ask, but publish this information around income and expenditure so that citizens will now calculate the value on the ground, and so that you and I can also easily follow the money. But also when government officials are found wanted, what do you do? So let's take the example of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. You've suspended the minister, but nothing has been done. No investigation, no prosecution, no one puts behind bars. So the perception you're sending is you're actually protecting people who are corrupt, or you're actually complicit in corrupt practices. I know Connected Development have built a tool called the NomTrack tool, where we can shared with citizens to nominate. And then when the budget is passed, because in the 2024 budget, there's over 100 billion for constituency project. And this goes to this was voted in by members of National Assembly. So we're saying use our NomTrack tool when it's nominated. And when you provide the oversight function, there's a tool to also track it, working with media and civil society, and most importantly, your constituents, so that you can track this expenditure and citizens can start to take ownership, because there's a big disconnect between what the government is doing or proposing to do and what the citizens on the ground at the grassroots actually want. You'll be surprised to know A lot of communities don't have access to potable drinking water. And so right now we're undertaking an outrage in the Northeast. Because of $2, a lot of girls have dropped out of school. So now people don't even have, and $2, just to break this into simple naira, is 3,000 naira. In short, 2 days ago, my colleague broke down at the community, tearing up because she could not imagine, she could not process that because of 3,000 naira. A girl could not write her exams in senior secondary school. So just imagine, this is just one community in the Northeast. Not to talk of when you undertake a study across Nigeria. So even families that can send their girl child to school before now, they can no longer send their girl child to school. Now they have to prioritize the boys because a lot of families still see girls as people who they're going to marry off, particularly in northern Nigeria, where I come from.
I'm wondering if Mr. Musa is back with us now, because I was expecting a response to the question. We don't have Mr. Musa back, unfortunately, so I'm going to come back to you, Mr. Soweto. Let's talk about the youth once again and the fact that the IG has called for the youth to present your demands from whatever fora. And the process, like you noted, you said that the president has already said, I've heard you, to a non-existent claim from the youth who have not actually expressed themselves. But the IG has said, present your demands. First of all, who's going to present that demand as a representative of the youth? And have they even done so at all? Process. Have the youth followed that process? Now, I'm only playing devil's advocate here and would like to know.
Well, yesterday, Ebunade Gboruwa, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, already wrote a letter to the IG informing and giving notice of the process. And I'm also aware that another lawyer in EBF has done the same on behalf of the entire movement. So from that point of view, I mean, it should be said that the security agencies have been well informed of the protest, as well as the issues for which the protest, has been called. What needs to be done now is for the security agencies to do their job, because it's not the job of the IG anyway to ask protesters to present their demand. It's not an elected official.
Who do you expect it to have been?
His job is to provide security. If you want to do a rally, if you want to do a party, if you want to do any event that would disrupt the flow of traffic and all of that, the police are to go there and ensure that things goes well. It is not their own job to ask for why you are doing this or that you present your demands. And that is why the IG needs to be called out, to do that. Because on June 12th protest, there were roles that the police played, which was intended to disrupt the protest. They should know that, and I think Nigerians should know that no protest ever starts, as a non-peaceful protest. Usually, protest becomes riot when the police go there and they begin to fire tear gas or live rounds indiscriminately. When people are shot, then of course, tension will rise and things can then go berserk. The police therefore have a big responsibility not to act in that way. And if they don't, like we saw on June 12 protest, if they caution themselves, then the protest will take place and nothing all right would happen. Because what we are interested in really is not chaos. It's for our demands to be heard. And that is the intention, of this movement. Now, on the question of dialogue, and I'll keep saying this, the character of this protest is an organic movement that's erupted from below. The question of dialogue, the question of representation.
They tell them to buff,
would be worked out in the process of the movement is self-developing. Right now, nobody that is called to Alausa or called to Aso Rock can speak for the entirety of the movement. But you remember that when ENSA started occurring, when it started unfolding, there were representations, there were demands presented, and there was interaction, between protesters and the government. That is also why it's going to be, in this current situation. So what government therefore needs to do is to also prepare themselves to be able to receive protesters at the different states where protests will take place, to receive those demands and begin to act on them.
Now, Musa, I understand you're back now. Musa, very quickly, because we're pressed for time. You mentioned earlier the importance of maintaining public order. And you also said that, protest is the fundamental human right of every citizen, and it's important. You support that. But to maintain public order, how does the APC and by extension the presidency and the federal government intend to protect the rights of the citizens by making sure that the protest is not hijacked and they protect the citizens as they go out to exercise their rights?
Thank you very much. I said earlier that the federal government, I don't work under the federal government. I'm not on their payroll, but I have to speak on the view of what Mr. President is doing currently by holding meetings with service chiefs to ensure that there is peaceful protest. And for me, we should protest, but protest in a manner that people will not take advantage of the protest to disrupt the properties and lives of people. So if I tell you, oh, I don't feel what Nigerians are feeling, then I am not on the part of justice. The president is doing everything humanly possible to ensure that the service chiefs do the needs to protect the protesters, protect them so that they can carry out genuine protest, not people going to protest. At the end of the day, you see them using opportunity to do things that are indifferently to what the real people that want to do the protest want to do. For me, they let us, support whatever Nigerians are doing. I encourage the federal government to support the protest, but ensure that it is not taken out of hand. Because in recent times of
Ahmed, Musa, we apologize, but we have run out of time and we'll have to end it here, this conversation. But thank you very much for your contributions. Unfortunately, we had that issue with you from earlier. But we will continue this conversation, and this is to our viewers out there now tomorrow. So if you still want to, you can join us then. Thank you very much to our guests who we've had today, Ahmed, Musa, Mr. Hamzat, and of course, Mrs. Soweto, who is inside of the studio here with us.